By 2030, the United Nations plans to overcome famine on the planet, but the coronavirus pandemic has ruined those plans. The United Nations World Food Program forecast for 2021 was disastrous. A hunger map was made which included 93 countries. Almost 240 million were malnourished, but international organizations from developed countries came to their aid. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has put the provision of food support to these states at risk. Both countries at war are major suppliers of wheat, as well as corn and barley, which mainly are animal foodstuff. Joseph Glauber, an expert at the International Food Policy Research Institute, said that more than 10% of the world food market depends on Ukraine. If Russia is also taken into account, the figure rises to 30%. War can dramatically reduce the world's grain stocks after the new crop is harvested. The head of the World Food Program, David Beasley, at the UN Security Council compared it to the Second World War crisis. Ukraine will significantly reduce the harvesting of grain crops and their export due to a lack of the necessary labor force. Many wheat farmers are fighting the Russians. But even the remaining farmers often cannot cultivate the land, and Russian occupiers are turning Ukrainian farmlands into minefields. Large areas of agricultural land 130 kilometers northeast of Kiev, around the city of Nizhyn, are stuffed with explosives. As a whole, mines are scattered across the country on 30 million hectares of agricultural land. During the sowing season, enemy attacks on bulk plants, fuel, and lubricant storages became systemic. Missile attacks destroy infrastructure in Kiev, Zaporizhia, Lviv, Odessa, Chernihiv, Kherson, Kharkiv, and other regions. Now the country has only 20% of the fuel needed for agriculture as the attacks continue. The enemy constantly destroys agricultural equipment. In the Sumy region settlements, more than 30 cars were bombed in just one day. Missile and artillery attacks on warehouses with plant protection products and elevators are unabated. In addition, Russians are using agricultural equipment for engineering work, fortification construction, as tractors for armored vehicles. As the war continues, grain exports has become impossible. Most of the 2021 wheat harvest has already been exported from Ukraine, but 30% is still waiting to be shipped. The same situation is with corn. According to U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, the blocking of Ukrainian ports by the Russian military does not allow these cargoes to be exported by sea. Russia has already bombed at least 3 grain carriers in Black Sea ports. One of them was chartered by an agro-industrial company. Due to the shortage of fuel and an increase in its price, plant protection products, and workers, the used fields area in Ukraine may decrease by 30%. According to Joseph Glauber, this will be a blow to the food security of countries that import Ukrainian agricultural products. This will especially affect Egypt, which receives more than half of all products from Ukraine and Russia. The country imports 85% of grain from Ukraine alone. Lebanon exports not much less, 81% of Ukrainian wheat and corn. Heavily dependent on supplies from the 2 warring countries are Cameroon, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Libya, Nigeria, South Sudan, Sudan, and Yemen. The food crisis will also affect developed countries because world commodity markets are closely interconnected. Europe and the US are likely to face even higher inflation, higher unemployment rate, and a decrease in economic growth. The scale of the crisis may reach its peak as it was in the 1970s. But still, according to Joseph Glauber, there is enough food to feed the world. However, because of the rise in prices, only rich countries will surely be able to afford them. Some are already actively preparing. China is preparing the largest food supply. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, China in the first half of 2022 will buy up to 69% of the world's corn, 60% of rice, and 51% of wheat. Poor countries cannot afford to make purchases ahead of time. For example, the cost of wheat this year has already increased by 20 to 50% and will continue to grow. International organizations will not be able to soften the price shock for third world countries. On the contrary, due to the rise in food price, fuel, and transportation, they will limit the delivery of food to the regions in need. David Beasley noted that in Yemen, where there is a war, about 8 million people will not receive it. In general, assistance to the country will be reduced by 50%, and in the future, it may be completely stopped. To mitigate the consequences of the food crisis, the governments of many countries are taking preventive measures. Algeria has banned the export of farina, pasta, and other wheat products. Egypt has temporarily banned the re-export of wheat. Lebanon banned the export of food supplies, and Hungary does not allow to export grain. French Minister of Agriculture and Food, Julien de Normandie, wants to expand the area under crops in his country and calls on the entire European Union to follow his example. In return, the Ukrainian authorities promise to repay interest on loans to cover any expenses of agricultural producers. They will also provide guarantees for the payment of 80% of the amount of loans up to $1.5 million received by farmers. But these steps can only ease the food crisis. The planet may still experience a total famine if Ukraine, the world's breadbasket, stands in line for bread. There is only one way out: the war must end. It was started by Russian President Putin in defiance of democracy laws, good neighborliness, and simple humanity. He clearly wants to provoke a shortage of food not only in Ukraine but throughout the world. The Kremlin dictator will continue to destroy Ukraine until the world community stops him. This must be done in the shortest possible time. The longer Putin's military intervention lasts, the deeper Ukraine's agricultural sector will plunge into crisis. This means that more people on the planet will be out of bread.